In 1991, a researcher named Dr. Leonard Poon drove to a small town in Georgia to meet a man named Thomas. Thomas was 100 years old. He still lived alone. He still cooked his own meals. He still walked to his neighbor's house every Tuesday afternoon to play cards, the same neighbor he had played cards with for 43 years. Dr. Poon pulled out his notepad and asked Thomas what he believed had kept him alive and healthy for a century. Thomas didn't answer right away. He dealt the cards. He took a sip of his tea, and then he looked up and said something Dr. Poon would quote in research papers for the next 30 years. We're going to come back to Thomas. But first I need to tell you about the study that brought Dr. Poon to that kitchen, because what it found about the habits of people who live past 90 is unlike anything you've heard before. And I promise you, habit number 4 is going to surprise you. Most people do the opposite of it their entire lives. Stay with me. Welcome back to the Wiser Years. If you're new, this channel is built for one purpose: giving people over 50 the real, research-backed health information that too often gets lost between the doctor's office and the dinner table. Quick note before we go: I'm not a doctor. Nothing here is medical advice. And if you have specific health concerns, please talk to your own physician. What we do here is translate the research into plain language you can actually use. Disclaimer is on screen. Read it. Then let's go. Now, I want to be clear about something before we get into the habits. This is not a list of things you need to do perfectly. Thomas didn't do any of this perfectly. None of the people in Dr. Poon's research did. What they had was a consistent direction, a set of tendencies that showed up day after day, year after year, across radically different lives, cultures, and circumstances. That's what we're looking for. Not perfection, direction. Let's start at the beginning. In 1988, Dr. Leonard Poon, a psychologist and gerontologist at the University of Georgia, launched one of the most detailed scientific studies of very old people ever conducted anywhere in the world. He called it the Georgia Centenarian Study. Over the next 2 decades, his team interviewed, tested, and tracked hundreds of centenarians, people 100 years old and older, alongside octogenarians in their 80s and a younger comparison group. The goal was simple but ambitious: figure out what actually separates the people who make it to 100 from those who don't. Not what supplements they took, not whether they had good genes, though genes were examined too, but the daily habits, the choices, the patterns. What Dr. Poon found, and what several parallel studies confirmed, overturned assumptions that had guided medicine for decades. And the finding that surprised him most, the one that took his team years to fully accept, is coming up in just a few minutes. But first, habit number 1. Because this one sets the foundation for everything else. Habit number 1. People who live past 90 treat sleep the way most of us treat eating. Not as optional, not as something to catch up on at the weekend. As a daily, non-negotiable biological requirement. Across the Georgia Centenarian Study, the 90-plus study at UC Irvine, and the Nurses' Health Study, which tracked over 70,000 women for decades, consistent, quality sleep emerged as one of the most powerful independent predictors of longevity. Not how long they slept, but how consistently. The people who went to bed and woke at roughly the same time every day, even on weekends, even on holidays, showed significantly better cognitive preservation and significantly lower rates of cardiovascular disease compared to those with irregular sleep patterns. Here is the mechanism in plain language. During deep sleep, your brain activates a system called the glymphatic system, essentially a biological cleaning cycle that flushes out metabolic waste products that accumulate throughout the day. One of those waste products is amyloid beta, the protein associated with Alzheimer's disease. Miss enough deep sleep consistently, and those waste products accumulate faster than the brain can clear them. The people who reach 90 in good cognitive health are almost universally people who took sleep seriously long before it became a health conversation. Practical takeaway: pick a bedtime and a wake time and hold them, 7 days a week, within a 30-minute window, for 30 consecutive days. Not because you'll feel different tomorrow, because the benefit is cumulative. It builds the way interest builds in a savings account. Slowly, invisibly, and then unmistakably. Now, here is the finding from Dr. Poon's research that I mentioned earlier, the one that surprised everyone. It involves the relationship between stress and longevity, and it completely contradicts what most people believe. Here is what the research on centenarians found about stress that almost nobody talks about. The people who lived longest were not the most relaxed people. They were not the people who avoided difficulty, conflict, or hard emotion. In fact, Dr. Poon's team found that many centenarians had experienced extraordinary hardship during their lives. Loss, war, poverty, illness, grief. What they shared was not the absence of stress. It was a specific way of processing it. Researchers identified what they called a let-it-go mechanism, a consistent tendency across cultures and backgrounds to feel difficult emotions fully and then release them relatively quickly, rather than carrying them forward indefinitely. They didn't suppress. They didn't avoid. They felt it, and then they moved on. This is meaningfully different from what chronic stress does to the body. Chronic, unresolved stress keeps cortisol elevated, and sustained high cortisol accelerates cellular aging, suppresses immune function, disrupts sleep architecture, and increases cardiovascular risk. The centenarians weren't stress-free. They were stress-resilient. And the research suggests this is at least partially a learnable skill, not just a personality trait you either have or don't. Practices like mindfulness, regular physical movement, and strong social connection all measurably improve what researchers call stress recovery rate, how quickly the body returns to baseline after a stressful event. The goal isn't a calm life. It's a life where difficult things don't get to stay longer than they should. Habit number 3. And I want to be very deliberate about the distinction I'm making here, because it changes everything about how this habit feels to implement. People who live past 90 are not people who exercised intensely. Many of them never set foot in a gym. What they shared was daily, consistent, low to moderate intensity movement, integrated into the ordinary hours of their lives. Walking to visit a neighbor, tending a small garden, doing housework without shortcuts, taking stairs without a second thought. The landmark Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging, one of the longest-running studies of human aging in history, found that adults who maintained moderate physical activity consistently over decades had dramatically better outcomes across every health marker compared to those who exercised intensely in their younger years but became sedentary after 60. The key word is consistently. 3 miles walked every day for 30 years does more for longevity than a gym membership used intensely for 3 years. And here's the finding that matters most for this audience. It is never too late to start. Research published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine found that adults who became physically active in their 60s gained significant longevity benefits, even if they had been largely sedentary for decades before. The body responds. At any age. Before habit number 4, I want to ask you something. When was the last time you did something that made you feel genuinely uncomfortable? Not physically uncomfortable. Mentally. Emotionally. Socially. Hold that thought. Because habit number 4 is where this gets counterintuitive. Habit number 4. The counterintuitive one I promised at the very beginning. People who live past 90 are not people who optimize their lives for comfort. In study after study, centenarians describe lives that contain significant challenge, and describe those challenges not as unfortunate interruptions, but as the very things that kept them sharp, motivated, and alive. Dr. Poon's research identified what his team called productive engagement with difficulty, a consistent pattern among the longest-lived participants of deliberately engaging with challenging tasks rather than retreating from them as they aged. Learning new things, taking on unfamiliar responsibilities, staying in the workforce, even part-time, even voluntarily, well past the age most people retire. Engaging with younger people and new ideas rather than retreating into exclusively familiar social circles. The neuroscience behind this is now well established. Cognitive challenge stimulates neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons, and promotes the formation of new synaptic connections in a brain that might otherwise begin to prune them. The brain, it turns out, responds to the same basic principle as a muscle. Use it in ways that challenge it, or gradually lose capacity. But here's the piece that goes beyond the neuroscience. The centenarians in Dr. Poon's study who maintained the strongest sense of agency, the belief that their choices still mattered, that they could still affect outcomes, that they were not simply passengers in their own lives, lived longer than those who didn't. Not by a small margin, by a statistically significant one. Comfort is not the enemy of a long life, but the pursuit of comfort as the primary goal, above challenge, growth, and agency, might be. Habit number 5, and yes, I said drink. One of the most replicated and least discussed findings in centenarian research is that moderate alcohol consumption, specifically 1 to 2 drinks per day, most commonly wine or spirits, appears consistently among the longest-lived populations. The 90-plus study found that people who drank moderate amounts of alcohol daily or almost daily lived longer on average than those who abstained entirely. Now, I want to be very careful here. This is not a recommendation to start drinking. The research on alcohol is complex, the risks are real, and if you don't drink, the evidence does not suggest you should start. What the finding points to is likely a combination of factors: the social rituals around moderate drinking, the relaxation effect, and possibly the resveratrol content in red wine specifically. What is consistent across virtually every centenarian population is how they eat. Mostly whole, minimally processed foods, predominantly plant-based, in modest quantities, shared with other people. Not a specific diet. Not calorie counting. Not macro tracking. Just real food. Not too much, mostly plants. As author Michael Pollan famously summarized the entire field of nutritional science in 7 words. The centenarians didn't make food complicated. They made it social. They made it regular. And they made it mostly from ingredients they recognized. Now, the 15-minute rule I mentioned earlier. The habit that almost nobody talks about in the context of longevity. We're getting there right now. Habit number 6. And this one the research is clearest on, clearer in many ways than the evidence on diet or exercise. A meta-analysis of 148 studies involving over 300,000 participants found that people with strong social relationships had a 50% greater likelihood of survival than those with weak or insufficient social ties. 50%. To put that in context, that effect size is larger than quitting smoking, larger than regular exercise, larger than avoiding obesity. The researchers concluded that social isolation carries health risks equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. People who live past 90 are almost universally people who invested in relationships consistently, not occasionally, not when it was convenient, but as a regular, protected part of their week. And critically, they adapted. When friends died, they made new ones. When family moved away, they built local community. When physical limitations made certain social activities harder, they found other ways to stay connected. They treated their social lives the way they treated their health, as something that required ongoing attention and maintenance, not something that would take care of itself. The practical version of this habit is simple. Schedule connection the way you schedule a doctor's appointment. Put it in the calendar. Protect it from being canceled. Show up even when you don't feel like it. Because the research suggests that the days you don't feel like it may be precisely the days it matters most. Habit number 7. And the 15-minute rule. People who live past 90 almost universally describe at least one thing they look forward to every single day. Not every week. Not on special occasions. Every day? For Thomas, the man playing cards at the beginning of this video, it was his Tuesday card game. And his morning tea. And the 15 minutes he spent every evening sitting on his porch watching the light change. His neurologist noted in the research record that Thomas had done this. The porch, the light, the 15 minutes. Every evening for decades. Not because anyone told him to. Because it made him feel like the day had been worth living. Researchers have given this phenomenon different names in different studies. Dr. Poon called it daily meaningful engagement. The Japanese call it ikigai. Martin Seligman's positive psychology framework calls it engagement and meaning. But across all of them, the finding is the same. People who can identify something specific, however small, that made today worth getting up for show consistently better outcomes across every marker of aging that researchers have been able to measure. Cognitive preservation, immune function, cardiovascular health, physical mobility, reported happiness. The 15-minute rule is this. Find something, anything, that takes about 15 minutes, that you genuinely look forward to, and do it every single day. Not as a reward, not as something you earn, as an anchor, as the daily signal to your brain and your body that today had a reason, and tomorrow will too. It doesn't have to be productive. It doesn't have to benefit anyone else. It just has to be real. Back to Thomas. Dr. Poon asked him what had kept him alive and well for a century. Thomas dealt the cards. He took a sip of his tea, and then he said, "I never wasted a Tuesday." Dr. Poon asked him what he meant. Thomas said, "Every Tuesday, I play cards with my neighbor. Been doing it 43 years. Some Tuesdays I didn't feel like going. Some Tuesdays I was sick. Some Tuesdays I had lost something that week. A friend, a bit of health, a bit of hope. But I went. Because the Tuesday was already there. All I had to do was not waste it. He was talking about cards. He was talking about all 7 habits at once. Movement, consistency, social connection, daily meaning, stress that gets released rather than carried, simple food, simple pleasures, small commitments kept. He wasn't trying to live to 100. He was trying not to waste a Tuesday. And here he was. 7 habits. Let's bring them together. Habit 1. Treat sleep as non-negotiable. Same time, every night, 7 days a week. The brain cleans itself while you sleep. Let it. Habit 2. Build stress resilience, not a stress-free life. Feel it. Process it. Let it go. Don't carry what isn't yours to carry. Habit 3. Move every single day. Not intensely. Consistently. 3 miles a day for 30 years beats a gym membership you abandon. Habit 4. Embrace discomfort. Stay in the challenge. Keep learning. Keep choosing. Comfort as the primary goal may be the one habit that shortens a life. Habit 5. Eat simply. Drink moderately if you do at all. Real food, not too much, mostly plants. Make it social. Make it regular. Don't make it complicated. Habit 6. Protect your social circle like it's medicine. Schedule connection. Show up even when you don't feel like it. Make new friends when you lose old ones. Habit 7. Find something small that makes today worth getting up for. Every day, without exception, your porch and the changing light counts. Your Tuesday card game counts. Whatever it is, protect it. Show up for it. Don't waste it. Here is what I keep coming back to every time I go through this research. The people who lived the longest didn't set out to live long. They set out to live well. In the smallest, most ordinary, most consistent ways they knew. They slept. They moved. They connected. They ate simply. They let things go. They found something to look forward to every single day. And they showed up for it, Tuesday after Tuesday after Tuesday. Until one day they looked up and realized they were 100 years old and the cards were still being dealt and the tea was still warm and there was still light on the porch worth watching. That is the whole secret. Not a supplement. Not a diet. Not a protocol. Just a life, lived forward, one Tuesday at a time. Tell me in the comments, which of these 7 habits do you already have, and which one are you going to start this week? I read every single reply, and your answers genuinely shape what comes next on this channel. If this helped you, share it with someone who needs a reason to not waste their next Tuesday. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Next week, we're covering 5 early signs of dementia that almost everyone mistakes for normal aging. One of them is happening to millions of people right now who have no idea what it means. We'll get into it next week. Take care of your Tuesdays.